Welcome to Freaked Out with your co-host, Liz and Landen.
What's up, everybody?
Oh, guys, we have been dying to talk to you guys about all this information. We have been talking about it for weeks now, and we had to bring it to you as soon as we found out. So I'm glad we squeezed this episode in ASAP. Now, we can finally spill the beans without actually spilling beans. For those of you who do not understand what we're talking about, I highly recommend going back to the season 1, episode 4 of the exclusive side and take a listen to the 2-part episode you're not going to want to miss.
Absolutely, guys. Go take a listen to that. We do not want to repeat ourselves on exactly what took place with this particular case. So just go listen to that and you'll figure it out.
Now, we all know the story of JonBenét Ramsey and what took place there, but I'll give you guys a couple of little details just to refresh your memory. I just want to show you guys how things went, so I decided to record the entire conversation of what took place between me and Patsy, and I'll tell you something. It was one hell of a wild ride. So a few things may sound confusing, but that's because I wanted you guys to get the full scoop of what I had to deal with.
And previously, JonBenét and Patsy had told Liz that it was not anybody in the family and that it was somebody closely connected to the family. And they continuously just kept emphasizing that Burke was not the culprit.
They were overly stressing that and really wanted to make sure that I put out that information over and over again. Of course, you know, when I feel as though somebody is innocent and when I'm being told that someone's innocent, I'm going to stress that.
Now, a lot of people are worried that other spirits may have concluded the same information by not sharing the truth.
And I totally understand why people would feel that way, which is why I do plan to continue to work on the older cases that we've already covered to really uncover more and more information as we carry on, because let's face it, we've gotten better over the years. But most of the time, I do not feel as though the spirits are untruthful. Now, just having this conversation with Patsy, she took over the whole conversation the first time around. And I believe that was because JonBenét was actually interested in being completely honest and giving me all the details. But because they didn't want anything badly to take place against Burke, they decided against it.
I remember Amy Fry Pitson giving that, kind of same runaround that was like confusing, you quite a bit when we were doing Timothy's case there.
Oh, God, yeah. She drove me insane, and that took place as well. But with her, I was already very hesitant and did not believe her to begin with, so it was easier to see through her lies. Even though she tried to play me like a fiddle, I can instantly see that some things were really off and that wasn't real. The only reason I connected to her in the first place is because I thought that perhaps her son might have been dead, and well, that's basically the only reason. But I have searched long and hard when it comes to Timothy Pitson, and I knew for a fact that he was not dead. And I have yet to feel his energy and his mother's. Although she is a pathological liar, I don't feel like she's capable or physically able to keep him hidden, at least in the spiritual world. I keep seeing him alive, so that gives me hope. But yes, let's carry on with this particular episode and all the wild shenanigans that took place.
All right, now on December 26, 1996, 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey was reported missing after her family reported finding a ransom note inside their home on the 700 block of 15th Street. She was later found inside the home, deceased. Her death has been ruled a homicide.
Her father, John, found the girl's body in the basement of their home about 7 hours after she had been reported missing. She had sustained a broken skull from a blow to the head and had been strangled, and a garrote was found tied around her neck. The autopsy report stated that JonBenét's official cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation associated with brain trauma.
Her death was ruled a homicide. The case generated worldwide public and media interest, in part because her mother, Patsy Ramsey, a former beauty queen, had entered JonBenét into a series of child beauty pageants. The crime is still considered a cold case and remains an open investigation with the Boulder Police Department.
And as I said, we're just giving a brief overview that you guys may have forgotten a few details. But I do want to talk to you guys about what took place with me and this particular case more recently.
Now, anytime Liz takes any time off, she ends up getting an overload of spirits trying to connect with her. And because she is at maximum capacity of communicating with the spirits during her work week, sometimes it takes a minute for them to come through, or they'll find the time to do so in this case. And we were watching Law and Order, specifically the SVU version.
Yeah, for those of you interested in listening or watching the episode, it was called Complicated, which was season 19, episode 5. And as we were watching this episode, I kept hearing, pay attention to this episode, because sometimes I don't pay attention. I get distracted with my phone or other projects.
Always.
Anyways, the basic detail of this case was that there was a missing girl who had finally come home. She had claimed to be a daughter of this man and wife whose daughter had gone missing. And they also had a son, and everyone was happy to have her back. However, as the plot changes, we find out that this girl is just an imposter posing as a missing daughter. So basically, she could have a better life. And we come to find out that the husband had buried the original daughter's body, and the son had actually accidentally killed his sister.
Now, do you know who is telling you to pay attention to this episode?
Well, yeah. It was not JonBenét or her mother. In fact, it was Harmony Montgomery, Selena Mays, Kaylee Anthony, Ryan Larson. There are so many kid spirits that just want to help solve crimes. And they really open up my eyes to see that. And kids see the truth a lot better than adults do. And they all kind of hang out. And by the way, as soon as I did JonBenét's episode, she disappeared and never came back, which is kind of unusual. Even the Skelton brothers appear every once in a while, and I didn't spend a whole heck of a lot of time with them.
Now, is there a reason for that?
Oh yeah, many reasons. So as soon as I started to try to channel JonBenét and her mother again, instantly I was kind of shut down. Now JonBenét gave me an inkling that she wanted to talk about it, but her mother was kind of shushing it. So from there I instantly went into like detective mode and decided that since my rose-colored glasses were off, I would start to pick up on things better. So from what I gather, there are a lot of stories that, none of us knew. And I know what you're thinking. You think that, Burke had something to do with it. Yes. But from what she told me, it was not in the manner that we think. From what I gather, on December 25th, just one day before she was murdered, I keep seeing that the kids were goofing off. And from what I can see, they obviously had a lot of new toys and a lot of new things, and they were testing everything out. And from what I gather, JonBenét got a lot of Christmas toys that reflected like the female energy and what a female would, like, versus what Burke had gotten, more masculine energy type toys. And of course, JonBenét, being a younger sister, wanted to play with them.
I can attest to that kind of energy. I know that anytime that I would get anything for Christmas, my sister or my brother would definitely want to take my stuff and play with it.
Oh yeah, my brother never really was interested in any of my stuff, but I was older. But I was always interested in his stuff. It always seemed really cool. And from time to time, I would take my brother's stuff and play with it too. Privately, of course, because I didn't want him to think his shit was cool,
So what happened next?
Now, from what I gather, she had taken one of his toys and he was really pissed off because he was looking for it and decided to fight her for it. And from what I gather, he sat on a pillow on top of her and basically suffocated her. She was screaming. And apparently the parents were both occupied, and apparently this was a very normal for their household where the kids would be goofing off, so they didn't really take note of it.
Now, was there anyone around at all?
Now, from what I gather, it was either mom cleaning up the house, Burke and his sister were in the living room. I believe dad may have been outside, but everyone was in and around the vicinity. There were another 2 people there as well, could have been John's friends. I do feel like these other 2 people were sitting down somewhere else. I keep seeing Mom had a lot of things on her plate when it came to cleaning, and she was just trying to organize some things while her guest was sitting comfortably alongside of her. So perhaps the woman was with her and the man was outside with John.
So basically no one was around the kids, though.
Yeah, the kids may have been in the basement, though, not in the living room. Looks exactly like the voices were muffled. So yeah, I'm going to say basement. Now, from what I gather at this point, it's when Burke started to realize that his sister was not screaming anymore. And so he removed the pillow and really noticed that she was unconscious, and he started to panic. I don't necessarily feel like he involved his mother. I'm not exactly sure. Perhaps I'm just in utter denial, or perhaps they're not giving me all the details. But either way, Mom is claiming that she was not part of this cover-up. I'm going to say that Burke went outside to obtain his father's attention, to let him know that his sister was hurt. But I also feel like when John came downstairs to see what's going on, I don't know. I believe that the guests followed them downstairs. I see that. John realized what took place and his daughter was no longer alive. I see it took him approximately 20 minutes to do anything because he was just sitting there frozen.
So why didn't they call the police or like an ambulance or something?
From what I gather, John was certainly under the impression that she was gone and that she had no pulse. She was not breathing. She had been like that for approximately 20 minutes. Minimally, he also thought that his son was going to get in some major trouble. And although his son did not do this act intentionally, Burke had been violent in the past with JonBenét, leaving bruises, leaving marks on her body. And, she'd have to go to competition and her mother would have to hide those marks. But that was their normal, from what JonBenét keeps trying to tell me.
It's almost like they were overdoing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what did John decide to do in that moment?
Well, he knew she died due to asphyxiation because Burke had told what he did to her. And from what I gather, he decided to take action. That's when he put the garrote that was, the length of a white cord with a broken handle on it and a paintbrush tied to the double knot around her neck. Almost as if he had found a random contraption to leave the markings on his daughter's neck. From what I gathered, John cried through the entire process because he really did love his daughter.
Well, I know that the family loves her, but I personally just believe that they should have, maybe taken her to the hospital or something.
I agree with that. I'm also really not believing what they're telling me, or at least the whole truth. I'm thinking that maybe it was Burke being intentional. I'm seeing that he was one who got really angry. He, tied this thing around her neck. Dad saw no possible way of fixing the situation without his son going to jail and him losing both his children. So he started to take the rap for his son.
I mean, that definitely makes much more sense.
Absolutely, because you can tell that these parents are very, loving towards their kids, and why wouldn't they want to save their child, even if it was a small chance to protect their other kid? Which also makes me feel like he had really done this purposely, not necessarily to kill her, but to punish her in a pretty significant way.
Kind of to let her know, do this again, I'm gonna hurt you more, or try to prevent her,
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, JonBenét got a lot of attention from her family, from her fans, people out there at these pageants. She's the baby, so she got the baby title. Pretty much they get everything that they want. And she dressed up really nicely and she got her crowns. Everyone treated her well, like I said. So, of course, I feel like Burke was going to have some sort of resentment, anger, towards JonBenét. And he just snapped and took it out on her.
Yeah, which is incredibly disturbing. Basically, they are not necessarily giving me the details of him being guilty. They're basically making it look like an accident. But from the evidence and the details I'm gathering, especially since JonBenét is giving me much more information as we carry on recording this episode, but I really feel like he did this purposely. And I also feel like they're trying to protect him beyond the grave because he's not a bad person and he just took it out on his sister.
I mean, either way they want to spin this, they didn't want to lose the whole family, you know? Now, I have a few more questions when it comes to John hiding her body. Now, obviously, he put her in the basement where she was already, in a different room maybe, to hide her from everyone else. Now, did anyone else, like the guests, notice anything going on?
Well, this is crazy, but I do not feel like the mother ever found out. I do see that Burke was freaking out, losing his shit, and his father sat him down, told him that he had to calm down, it was an accident, and that he had to go along with it and pretend that somebody took her. Now, from what I can see, he told Burke that he basically said, hey, you're going to go to jail. And he would not be able to get out of jail, and he was scared. So this kid really just kept his mouth shut because his dad did a good job of freaking him right out. I know that John did share some of the information, maybe with a colleague. No, the lawyer. This lawyer was a close friend of his, and that's probably why he handled the situation in the way he did. I also believe that his lawyer concocted the entire plan on how to go about handling it. And there were other ways and other things that took place as well, which we're going to talk about here in a brief moment.
So how was John able to keep everyone, distracted?
According to Patsy, Christmas festivities, but I think he just made it seem like he was doing something surprising her. I'm not sure. I'm not getting all the details. It was getting closer to the evening time, also starting to really think that Patsy knew something. Maybe she didn't know right away, but I'm feeling like when she was going to put her kids to bed, she would have noticed her daughter missing.
I mean, absolutely. JonBenét was, their pride and joy, their breadwinner.
Yeah, so I'm still being lied to, which is crazy. But thanks to Eileen, who keeps blurting out that she's lying. What a wild ride. Like, my brain is just mush. It's like I'm having a fight happening in my brain. It is on fire with all the different information I'm receiving at the same time.
Well, Liz had to take a break and come back because everybody was just shouting all at the same time.
Oh my God. Yeah. Eileen is a human lie detector test. And because she lied so much in her life, she can pretty easily decipher when spirits or people are lying, which is great. Also, Patsy feels extremely uncomfortable around Eileen. She's almost like the Olivia Benson of the spiritual world when it comes to the interrogations, though.
I love her comeback. She really does want to do some good stuff. I really feel like she has evolved quite a bit since we've been talking to her and trying to guide her in that right direction, which is great.
Well, basically I had to come back, start over. I had to leave this for a few days and, calm down and then reevaluate. I decided that I didn't want to talk to Patsy anymore. And basically I know she's trying to protect her kids. Like, I don't know what I would do if it was me and my kid, hurt my other kid. I have no idea what I would do because I'm not in that position. But I mean, we do crazy shit. So she's trying her hardest to protect her kids. So I'm just trying to connect to JonBenét. And I see a couple other spirits there. So maybe it's her grandparents, JonBenét's grandparents, but I'm not too sure. I was able to drown out her mother, and I know her mother means well in trying to protect her men on the other side of the earth. I want to do a recap so you guys understand exactly what did take place versus her story. So from what I gather, the mother did know. Everyone knew, including the house guests that were there, and everyone was trying to come up with their own ideas and advice, and they had placed her in the windowless basement. Obviously, the father had found her approximately 7 hours after the mother had called 911. Now, from what I gather, she was dead for at least 12 to 24 hours, and they had planned to bury her somewhere. but they ran out of time and basically was trying to come up with the right plan on how to handle it. By the time the police were at the home, the police never really left, so they couldn't place her body elsewhere. They had to just concoct this story of John finding her. And from what I gather, they had like a plan A, plan B, plan C. So if they couldn't get her out of the house, they were going to move to plan B. If they couldn't get plan B, they would do plan C. It was just this big concoction.
Well, let's go back to the assault that had taken place with JonBenét. It looks like she was also hit over the head and then also sexually assaulted.
Which scares me beyond belief, because from what I gather, JonBenét had been sexually assaulted a few different times. So from the previous episodes, she had talked to me about a man coming into her room. It did happen. Maybe not this particular time, maybe not in relation to her death, but probably a few years prior. From what she shows me, she was sexually assaulted from time to time since she was 3 years old and until her dying day. I'm going to assume the sexual assault and the blow to the head was, in fact, done by Burke that day. However, seeing that he may have been sexually assaulted as well, and he was just kind of passing it along as he learned it himself. And the sexual assault came along with the rage fit that took place within him, murdering his sister and also bashing her over the head with whatever he had there. I don't know. And I believe that particular murder weapon was removed by the father as well.
Probably one of his toys.
I'm seeing like a white, almost like PVC piping, like a white tube pipe. I don't know.
Well, back then, the big toys and stuff, those like connector sets or those like, what are they called? Like the construction sets, you could make stuff or, whatever. Make roller coasters and all that kind of stuff. Something like that. Now, Burke seems, pretty messed up, and it was like a major cry for help. It's terrible that she was sexually assaulted, multiple times by multiple people, but also having to deal with that since a very young age was probably super difficult on her.
Oh, it's pretty disturbing, all right. Although he was a child, his brain was not functioning in the manner that an adult brain would work, but he still has those, urges in him. Perhaps he keeps them dormant and possibly received a lot of counseling to assist him. When it comes to her sexual assault, the family didn't really have any idea if this was taking place at all. And these people would make her promise to keep it secret, of course, and she would just get pretty gifts, jewelry, bracelets, costumes. I even feel like there may have even been a judge of one of her competitions that molested her as well.
Jesus. Those damn competitions. Although, they can have some positive outcomes for kids, I don't like them. They are just judging small children. I just don't understand that. I've always felt like there was something just disturbing with those things.
I would agree with you. It's a great thing to watch in the sense, for TV. For instance, the show Toddlers and Tiaras. I did watch that because I enjoyed seeing these beautiful kids performing and giving them a show, but I wish that they would make it more about talents, less than like looks. I feel and wish that they would do less of that because I feel like these kids would leave these scenarios feeling ugly. A lot of their family members would be sore losers and treat their children unfairly when they would lose. And then the kids, get to see their parents upset and they would become upset. And then, of course, these parents putting all their money into this and then, not getting anything back, not able to obtain that top prize, putting all their pressure on their kids. It's just terrible. If the parents handled it properly and things went down a little bit differently, I don't think it would be as bad of a thing, but it just also gives me the heebie-jeebies, especially knowing that a few judges were pedophiles.
Definitely should be talking about that a little bit more than the things we're currently focusing on, just my opinion. Now, you can definitely feel it sometimes being someone who is sexually assaulted. You just can determine when somebody else has been sexually assaulted or abused, and sometimes it's, almost like an intuitive ability for it.
Well, I plan to cover beauty pageants as a whole at some point, possibly on one of the lives, and talk about that show specifically, Toddlers and Tiaras. And I want to point out basically who I believe molested these kids. I also feel like these people would walk away with prizes due to their favorites. I feel like some of the parents were aware that the pedophile judges would, have an interest in their child and would allow them to hang out with their kids, which is even more disturbing.
Definitely disturbing. Definitely a good topic, though, to talk about one day, for sure. All right, now we are going to go back to what we were just talking about. They did not have any time to hide the body or bury her body, so they just placed her somewhere in the home in a room with no windows and then came up with the idea for the ransom note.
Yes, remember, like I was saying earlier, like plan A, plan B? Well, the ransom note was plan B. From what I gather, it was the lawyer, also the friend, the male friend that was present during all of this, and could, by the way, potentially be the person who had sexually assaulted JonBenét in the past. But, well, that's another matter for another day, which is even more disturbing. And they came up with the idea of the ransom note and decided to write it up themselves so that no one would conclude that John or his wife had completed this ransom note.
All right, so I know that the Ramseys had to take a lie detector test, and the first lie detector test was inconclusive. And then the second one that they both were found truthful when they denied their involvement. Is there anything you can talk about on that situation? Because I know I have my opinions.
So first time around, they were beyond petrified to take this polygraph test, but they did it anyways, even though they knew they were both going to fail it. From what I gather, because they were so overworked, the test coming back inconclusive really screwed them over. I do see, though, that they had a friend in the police force. Shocking. And he was able to obtain another lie detector test that I don't believe actually happened. I don't see that the test was actually completed, or they fudged the test. They put someone else in, the place of him and his wife for the test. I feel like something happened to make it seem like they were being, truthful and not to suspect them anymore. But he got a lot of help from the inside to proclaim his innocence. Even though John didn't physically do it, he did help dispose of her body.
When they asked a specific question, did you hurt your daughter? That wouldn't be a lie. No, they didn't, because it was Burke. But the covering it up and involvement in that way, absolutely. It's just odd that both of them had inconclusive tests the first time around, and then all of a sudden they come back and they're truthful. I think inconclusive would be a more suspicious thing, because that doesn't conclude that they were telling the truth, but it also doesn't conclude that they weren't involved or lying.
Exactly. The other thing I found out as well from JonBenét is that she had to keep silent because her mother and her other family members have just continued to silence her. She wanted to tell the truth. She does love her brother a lot, but she also knows that her brother can get into a lot of trouble, so she kept things quiet. She's used to being told what to do, how to do it, and not really having her own life away, which is sad. But I do feel like she's starting to separate herself from her mother when it comes to being independent. I actually even see growth in her age, which, I've spoken to her previously and she was very young, the same age that she had passed on. And I just found out something, that as these kids age, it's because they've grown, which is really neat. So, yeah.
Wow. Is there anything else that you want to talk about surrounding the particular case?
I did want to mention a few things. So first, let's talk about the ransom note. It was definitely unusually long and unnecessary to be that long. And that was written all by the lawyer. They wanted to make sure they covered all their bases. So he overdid it. From what I gather, the note was written right in the house. Keep seeing this black clipboard, leather, him taking the notepad, writing it on the clipboard. It took him a few hours to do it, but he also searched things up on his files. So perhaps cases he worked on previously, case law, where ransom notes may have been available for him, and he went to work. I'm seeing it took him 2.5 hours to 3 hours to write this note alone. I also feel like the lawyer had left, and I think his friend had left as well. Nobody wanted to be involved in this, and everyone kept their mouth shut because they were afraid of what this lawyer could do, of course. And basically ruining John's reputation, which, God forbid, couldn't happen.
Now, Patsy Ramsey had a very similar writing pattern as the quote-unquote kidnapper, but she wasn't the one to actually write the note.
No, ironically, they just wrote very similarly. I do believe it was her pad of paper. I do believe she had originally started to write the letter, and I think that's when the lawyer decided to take over. And of course, John allowed that to happen since he felt like he was the one to make the crime take place.
Now, they did find Patsy's fingerprints, though, on everything.
The reason for that is when she found her daughter dead, she freaked out. She went into shock. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't even let her go. She was holding on to her for a while. It was very dramatic, and tears were streaming down her face. John had to calm her down, and so did the other people that were there. Even before they had eventually stumbled upon her body, I see that Patsy had gone downstairs and held on to the daughter until the police arrived. Even after the police arrived, even before they had found the body, I see that Patsy was downstairs reliving that moment over and over again, and John had to basically get her to snap out of it as well.
The initial responding officer did not adhere to standard protocol either. Is there any particular reason for that?
Well, like I said earlier, he and many other people connected to John. He took even more of an approach of like a friend being in trouble or losing his daughter. This officer did not feel as though the family was immediately involved. And also because that strong relationship between him and John, he felt as though he was making a good call. I do see now that even years later, he had a lot of regret about how he handled that situation. I feel like he felt like he was fooled by John. I also feel like he may not necessarily even open up about what took place, but has definitely opened up to a few people within his family. And maybe one day when he dies, somebody will speak up on his behalf. Although hearsay, it wouldn't really go anywhere.
Well, when we say lawyer, we are referring to Lin Wood.
Absolutely. He's a very outspoken person, even to this day, who ended up defending Burke. And apparently he was also sued by Elon Musk at one point. From what I gather, he's a very crummy human being and definitely gave the Ramseys the opportunity to get away with covering up this murder. What's crazy to think is that after this situation, I feel like Lin Woods was given the opportunity to help other family members that needed things to be covered up. So he did a lot of random jobs to make things look as like an accident or hide things. I think he's just one of those slimy lawyers, which is another reason that this particular episode is going to be on the exclusive side, because I don't need this man trying to sue me. But I truly believe that Lin Wood has a huge connection to this and also other crimes that maybe one day we'll be able to figure out.
Now, from what I gather, they're doing a lot more DNA collecting and trying to solve this case as much as possible. Will there, be some sort of resolution to this? Will they, connect anything with Burke?
It is very possible for it to happen, and I feel like it can happen, but I also feel as though because they have ruled out the family, it's going to be impossible for them to get it onto him. I do feel like they will find other DNA evidence pointing out to potentially be one of her sexual assault predators that hurt her in the past. And as I sit here talking to her, she was molested on multiple occasions, and the only man that did not molest her was her father, John. She's even telling me that this lawyer may have, been involved in something too. They were all inappropriate with her. That's the kind of energy all the time due to this career in her pageants.
Sick people out there. I'm assuming if she, was alive today, she would have had a really rough life.
Oh, yeah. I see that she has been so traumatized. I do want to point out that she did not want to do any of this. As I sit here filing through these details, she's giving me more information. She does show me she didn't understand why her family trusted that Burke wouldn't do this to someone else. She says, he could have hurt anyone. She wishes her family would see the light. She also says that although he hasn't sexually assaulted anyone else, thankfully, he has had a lot of pedophilia thoughts about her. Young girls that look like her specifically, creepy. I also want to point out that she has no interest in the pageant life anymore. She stays far, far away from it. I'm assuming it's because of all the abuse she endured through it. And I do believe she will eventually come back. I do not see her getting involved in any sort of beauty-related things. I think she's going to be really scared of it. She may shy away from it all. I wouldn't be surprised if, she was like a farmer or a masculine woman looking rough. She doesn't want to wear makeup. Her hair is always in a bun. Although she's still beautiful, she does not look at herself like that. I know that she's currently working on her trauma, though, and I believe that, these are her preferences more than anything else. She just prefers them, and her mother is quite the opposite of that and kind of tries to push her in that direction still to this day, but she absolutely wants nothing to do with it.
Parents need to take a hint sometimes. So what a difference, though, from one episode to the next. I know this was really hard for you, and we definitely don't blame you for what took place.
I know, no blame on me, which is great, but I'm angry with myself that I let it happen. I was also really new at doing the case at this point and diving in. I always try to see the best in people. And so when a spirit tells me that their child didn't do it, I'm going to believe them, forgetting that I should be suspicious of everyone, just like a detective. It drives me crazy to have to go over these details again in such a different manner. Makes me feel like I didn't do JonBenét justice the first time, and it frustrates me beyond belief. You have no idea. But I do feel much better now that we've gotten the real story out, and it makes more sense to me, which is what I was hoping for. From what I gather, JonBenét is much happier now. Although she is scared of these details coming to light, she's at peace knowing that her brother is very capable of hurting someone else, and for people to be, a clearer picture on him, to warn them around him, She says that he has a very unhealthy obsession with her. She shows me that he spends a lot of time looking at her photos, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's really angry.
Definitely makes sense to me. The information is out there now. Glad that we've gotten the opportunity to give it to everyone. Next week, guys, we will be dropping the episode of Trenton Duckett.
Yes, that casually came out of nowhere. I was working through a bunch of cases in Florida on TikTok, and I felt this one needed to be talked about in a much bigger scale because I feel like there's so much to say and what happened about his death and his mother's untimely suicide.
Until next time, guys, stay freaked out.